But they have rules and guidelines. For example, again, their guideline is that when you pay for, when you have to have a roof replaced, their guideline is it's like $7 a square foot for roofing. Well, you're not going to get a bill to re-roof for $7 a square foot. So guess what? You have to pay for the rest of it. So that's what their rules are. So you can do whatever you want to do, but their guidelines determine. They do, but some of the guidelines are very strict. You have to have certain spaces, a certain size spaces, certain, for example, CTAE built rooms now. They're requiring them almost to be industry certified, and so certain labs have to be as much as 2,500 or greater square footage, and they will not accept them less. And they grandfather you in, but if you build a new space, it has to be that size. And then notice the next side, it says the school system's decision to determine what is safe and adequate for them as long as it makes the state's guidelines. Capital outlay is a needs-based program. So if you don't have any needs, you're not going to get any entitlement. Now let me talk about an entitlement, and then we're going to show you the entitlement sheet. The entitlement is your part of that $300 million. They set aside that $300 million, and they say, okay, each school system in the state of Georgia, there's 180 of those now, and gets a piece of that pie. So they don't divide that $300 million equally among the state. Union County doesn't get the same amount as Towns County or White County or Raven County and Fannin County and so on like that. I was trying to get my bearings here. What's east of us? That's Raven and well, no, Towns is it?
Towns and Raven both.
So you don't get an equal share. You have to pay your 5% local what is it, local fair share they call it? That's most every county in North Georgia, but it's not like that when they start giving out capital outlay credits. You have to prove that you need them. So it's a needs-based program. You have to prove that you need that capital outlay funding in the way of, and there's different ways to, different types of needs, and they're all determined by your facility plan. That's why your facility plan is so important. You have to determine your needs by showing them in your facility plan, and you get those, you consult architects, you consult people like myself, you consult construction management or construction companies to find out what these things cost when you put them in your plan. So you determine your needs through your facility plan. First one, as you see there, is a space need. It's determined by your FTE. Your FTE, the state has a guideline that tells you how many IUs, instructional units, that you have to have for the number of students that you are serving. I think a 450 student elementary school requires about 45 classrooms, I think. I'd have to go back and look at that. But they determine how many classrooms that you got to have based on what your FTE is. Now you're going to find that in a lot of school systems, they're going to have more IUs than what the state says they have to have. One is by choice. Second, that's by need. The state still goes on that old idea of you got 20 to 28 kids in a classroom. But you know that in your schools, you don't have 28 kids in the classroom. Special ed requirements is down to like 6 in some cases. So if you got 6 in the classroom, where does the other 22 go? You got to have a space for that. So as a local system, you have to provide that. You will provide that space. You don't have to, but you will, because that's what's important to you. So the space needs is determined by FTE. So when your FTE gets above a certain number, then the state starts to say, you need some additional classrooms. Just a few years ago, you built 10 classrooms at the primary school because the state agreed with your staff and with you that you needed 10 more to serve those students. So you built 10 more up there. But if you go to any school in the system, it don't matter how many classrooms are there, they're going to be using every one. And that principal's going to tell you, we need more space. Unfortunately, the state doesn't always recognize that you need that space. But you as a staff will recognize that because you're serving 8, 10 or fewer kids. Elementary now has to have this, what is this program that they have to have, they pull kids out? EIP, yeah, EIP. And so they have to pull those kids out to a different classroom to serve them, and depending on how many there are, that's a classroom, so there's other kids gotta be somewhere else. And so you gotta have classrooms to serve those people, and the DOE needs to catch themselves up to recognize that. Do you house pre-K kids? Yeah, you house pre-K, it's a federally funded program, I guess federally funded or state funded, lottery funded program. And you house them in your school system, but the state doesn't recognize that you house those kids. So you're housing however many you have, but the state says, well, I'm sorry, but that space is supposed to be set aside for the regular kids. So they're a little bit behind there. Other needs is in your plan is renovation needs. A renovation need is what you can see in this classroom. Now, that's the way it's defined. It's not anything structural. If this room needs new painting, new floor covering, new ceiling tiles, new lighting, new doors, new windows, that's considered a renovation need. So what we do with your facility plan is we go to each school in one of your schools, and we look at those buildings with the help of the architect, and we say, well, what kind of renovation needs are needed here? And we walk through with the experts and say, do we need new floor? Do we need new ceiling? Do we need new windows? And usually, if you do ceilings, then the grid comes along with it, so that's additional cost. And so those things are, even the painting is a renovation need. And we make sure that we put every renovation need that we can in your plan. Does it mean that every one of those renovation needs are going to be done? Absolutely not. First of all, the state's not going to give you enough money to pay for all of them. Actually, the state only allots about $14,000 per earned IU for renovation. So that's not close enough. If you look at, for example, the elementary school, in your renovation budget right now, you've got, and we'll look at it a little bit later, you've got about $1 million of renovation needs, and the state only is going to make you eligible for like 400,000. But they're not going to pay for that. So what could you do with $400,000? Paint it? Paint it, maybe put in some carpet or whatever you need. So they don't give you enough money, but all those needs, you want to put all those needs in there to let them know we have these needs. So we need our piece of that $300 million. And we'll talk about how it works in just a minute. Modification needs are more structural needs. HVAC, roofs, plumbing, electrical, and so on like that. That's all things that you can't see, but is structurally in nature that you need to improve on. So those are, and we go through each time to make sure that those are met. Keith and Chris are two of the best ones, and and I know that you say, well, they're paying you to say that. But they are two of the best people that I know in making sure that your needs are met, and on a timely basis. And we'll talk a little bit more about entitlement in a minute, but it goes back to that too. And then there's program needs. If you have a program in your school that the state recognizes as a requirement for your school, and it's not in your plan, that if you don't have it, then they'll put it in there as a need, and they'll participate in the cost of providing a program. For example, band and chorus and so on like that. When you build TLC, the state recognized you would have a need because we took the rooms in the high school that was band and chorus, and we repurposed those. So we would create a need up there to have band and chorus and drama and that thing. So you got a little state money, I believe, to do that. I would have to check back. So those are type needs that you have. They have added one now called modernization, where you can go into a school that is I think it has to be 40 years old. 40 years old. It has to be 40 years old. And they will give you additional money more than above the $14,000 per earned IU to go in and totally remodel that building. And that means basically gutting it out and starting over from the inside and keeping the structure. I think it's about $80 a square foot that they're offering for total modernization. But they have requirements, and you have to meet those requirements, and sometimes the requirements are greater than what you're willing to do for that kind of money, so. But that's a new program that's only been available to school systems, in the last year or two. I think Towns County is about to do a modernization program in their, middle high school building. So those are the kind of needs that's in your program. Now, those needs have a dollar amount assigned to it that you put in your thing. For example, a roof might cost you $300,000 to replace a roof on an elementary school. Well, that goes in your plan as a need, and that budget number goes with it. And so then the state looks at that budget number, and then they pare it down to what they say they're willing to pay for that roof. And so then a percentage of that need then is equated to entitlement. And so what they do is they take the needs in your plan, and they take that percentage, it amounts to about 10% of what your need is, converts actually into entitlement, your piece of the funds. And so we'll get more into that in a little bit, because it's important you see the sheet as we go. But those needs are confirmed that you are going to get part of that $300 million of credits into your school system. Now, when I worked with the DOE, we used to talk about, school superintendents would ask me all the time, how do I get my hands on the money? And I'd say, well, I know they just got it laying around down there in the state. They don't. It's not there. They only becomes money when they sell bonds for that, and they only sell bonds when you apply, and we're going to talk about the application process. Any questions so far?
Does the $300 million, I mean, is that spread out throughout the state? Is that part of that equalization?
No.
No. No, sir. And if they maintain, like annually, that's $300 million annually?
Yes.
Each year, they start the year out with $300 million.
Yeah. Now, that $300 million is not always used. That $300 million, remember, it's just credits.
Mm-hmm.
It's not actual dollars, but that $300 million is assigned to the state, or I shouldn't say appropriate. That $300 million is there if the state needs, if the needs of the school system in the state need it to be there. And then they, at the end of the time, at the end of the summer, they make that application for that, and then it becomes money when they sell the bonds.
I just did a quick number, 180 school systems divided by 300, that ain't a lot of money for them
No.
to do much renovation.
And you have to understand what Gwinnett gets in comparison to.
How's that paid for by the taxpayers?
It comes from the entire state. I guess the state, part of the budget and the property tax assessment coming from the state legislature has that built into it. So that if they sell the bond for it, then that tax money actually goes towards paying for it. And the good thing about it, like I say, it's not all of your tax money. You don't have to pay your part of it, all of it. You know, Towns County's paying a portion of it, and Next County and something like that.
But if we don't use it, we still are paying for the rest of the state's portion.
In a sense, yes. Yeah, that property taxes, when you pay your property, I don't understand all there is to know about property taxes. But when you pay your property taxes, it all goes to the state. You get a portion of that property tax back. And it goes to the school system, to the counties, whatever the case may be. But they hold a portion of that property tax. And that portion that they hold goes to pay for it.
But what I want to make sure of, if we say, okay, we're not even going to use this, that doesn't stop us from having to pay it. We're still paying our portion for all the
Oh,
other
yeah.
schools in the state.
Yes, that sounds unfair, but the fact is, that portion that they hold every year is part of that.
It's similar to that equalization thing, I guess, where you're,
It's
like,
just different, but it's,
where a millage rate here is worth this, a mill in Sparta, Georgia is worth this.
It's similar, but the calculation is
Yeah.
different on how they figure it out based on wealth.
Yeah. It is, yeah,
Property value.
it's all based on property wealth and some other things that goes into that, I'm not sure. Like I said, I don't know all there is to know about property tax.
But the difference between equalization and this pot of money is equalization changes about every year, okay? They either change the formula, or they change the wealth rankings, or digests go up and down, and so equalization is fluid. This 300 million, like you said, out of 10 years, they funded it at 100% level, 9 out of those 10 years. It pretty much stays the same.
And I'll say this, that the $300 million is, I don't remember, I don't think it's ever used, all of it every year. When Gwinnett County was in their building boom back in the early 2000s, possibly. But I don't think it's ever all of it used. So, which is a good thing to those people that are not using, I guess. Okay, now, I want to show you your entitlement sheet, because it's important that you see it. This is your most recent entitlement sheet. Now notice the date at the top first off. Notice the date at the top. It's a 2018 entitlement sheet. So you think, well, that's not even this year. Well, it actually is this year, based on the legislatures. You know, the legislatures, their budget, the budget they passed this year is a 2018 budget. So we're already using last year's budget. So this entitlement sheet is actually almost 2 years ahead of what it actually is. So notice on there that the different lines that's on there. Number one, the cost of eligible construction needs from your local plan. That is the amount of that the state recognizes as a need from your facility plan. Over 3,500,000. That's in your plan. That they're saying, that says in your plan that is needed in Union County to spend. Now, how would the Union County ever take $3.5 million out of the budget and do everything's in their plan? It's not possible. No system can do that. Not even the most wealthy system is going to have $3 million. They can say, oh, we can put $3 million into the budget. We can do everything's in that scope. It's not going to happen. As a matter of fact, that's only the state recognized portion of it. So that's less than half of what the actuals in the facility plan. So, but that is what your need is recognized in the plan goes. You are not eligible for low wealth or advanced funding. In the old days, there was a funding avenue for called advanced funding, where you could actually go to the state and petition for a mortgage and to be paid for by entitlement. And you're only eligible for advanced funding if you're in the bottom 25% of property wealth, and you're in the bottom 25% of the state in SPLOST collection. So, and you're not. So there are very few counties that are actually low wealth for advanced funding applicable now. The total cost of eligible needs in your plan, 3.5. Now, the next line is important. Line 5 tells you, you'll see 4 different numbers there. Those are the level. Remember I told you the state legislature only can pass it at 100%, 80%, and so on? Well, those are the levels. 300 million is 100%. If the state budget is passed at 100%, then Union County will get $351,000, almost $352,000 of that $300 million of credits. That's what's set aside for your system. Now, does it go away if you don't use it? No, it does not. It stays on your entitlement sheet forever until you decide to use it. Now, then the other numbers in there is that they're funded at less than 100%, 80%, 60%, 40%, and it could be 0, but those are the numbers. So as the budget was passed this year, you have $351,711 of credits set aside for Atlanta if you want to make application for some project that you're going to do. Now, do you want to make an application every year for that money? No, you probably don't, because you can't do a whole lot for $350,000. You might could replace the HVAC at one of your buildings, wholesale. Probably be close to having a roof. Now remember, that's only a portion of what it actually is gonna cost too, to do it. It's almost a little funny because we say the state's gonna fund this project. The state never funds a project. The state funds about half the project, and 40% is even a better number. So you might get $351,000 from them, but it's probably gonna cost you $600,000. But that's the number that you're gonna receive. If you use it, great. If you don't, it sits there. And you'll see on the next line, it says accumulated entitlement. And you'll notice that from 81 to 2013, you had 0 and right on up the line. Now, the reason there's that blanket number in there from 1981 to 2013, because in 2013, they changed some things. Prior to 2013, there was 2 different pots of money. There was regular entitlement and growth entitlement. So if your system was a growing system, you could pull from the growth pot. But if you weren't, you couldn't pull from that pot. You had to pull from the regular. So the growing systems like Lynette could pull from their regular and their growth because they were growing at such a great rate. So you guys have used up your accumulated in those years, and you'll notice that in 2017, last year, you accumulated $376,958. So on your entitlement sheet right now, you have a total of $351 and $376. So you got about $700,000 sitting in there as your piece of the $300 million for 2 years. So at some point down the road, when you determine there's a eligible project for you to do, then we'll work with Keith and Chris and Dr. Rayfield to do an application, and we'll draw that money from the state based on what you did. But I had a school system one time that wanted to build an elementary school. They wanted to build an elementary school really, really bad. But they had no need in their plan. And so I went down one day, and their entitlement sheet had about $6 million on it. And they said, we want that $6 million, we're going to build an elementary school. And I said, you can't get it. What do you mean you can't get it? That's because in your facility plan, you don't have a need for an elementary school. So you can't pull that money to build a school that you don't need. The state won't allow it. And so they were really disappointed. But the fact is, it has to be a need, and it has to be an eligible product, and it has to be in your facility plan. So that's important. Now look at the next line, line 7, required local participation percentage. You know what that means, though? That means you got to pay something. Matter of fact, you got to pay 20% of it. So whatever the project cost is, whatever the state allotment for that project is, 20% of it's your cost. And that 20% is just off the top. You don't actually write up a check for it. They take it off of what they send you. But, so that means that your local cost is going to be even greater. So this is what it is. It turns into actual cash. It shows you what your credit is, which turns into cash once you make an application. Now, you have a current application, am I correct? You have an application for a project at the high school. HVAC and roof, or just HVAC?
Just HVAC.
You have a current project application in place for we made an application for 2 different projects, did we not? We did for the primary school, maybe a roof there, and then the HVAC to high school. So you have 2 projects going on that you have not completed yet. You've done the roof at the primary school, but you're going to do that one this coming year, right? So that's in place, and the state's going to fund a big portion of it. I forgot how much it was.
About 900,000.
About 900,000. The state's allotting you to do that project. I don't know how much it's going to cost.
1.7.
1.7. So you can see where we are. About 20%. So that's your entitlement sheet. And in June, you're going to get a new one. And that 300 and something on line 1 and on 5 is going to drop down to accumulated. So you're going to start to accumulate so that you can have that next project that you want to do. you have state funding available to you if it's an eligible project. Just keep in mind, it has to be an eligible project and not just off the cuff type thing. Your staff has done a great job of zeroing out your entitlement. You'll notice that this year is the first year you've got accumulated entitlement. And for a system your size and your need, that is a great thing. Because you're probably not gonna be building any new schools in the system. Your school system is just not growing fast enough to actually do that. And so you don't need to build up an accumulated entitlement. You need to build it up for a couple of years, and then you need to identify projects to do the next project on, an HVAC, roofs, maybe a renovation project, or a modification project that you've been holding for a couple of years. But you start planning that, and Chris and I and Keith, we are already thinking about what's down the road for your school system. We met a couple times this year talking about what are the things down the road that we need to do. That's in our facility plan. So we've already got some thoughts in mind. We've not made anything concrete. There's nothing that is definite we're gonna do. We're just starting to think. Where are we? What we're gonna do? Where are we gonna be able to use this money down the road? So, and we don't know where it is yet. We haven't made that decision. So that's where we are with entitlement, and you understand a little bit more about those credits. Boy, wouldn't it be great if you could just go down to the state and say, I'd like my portion of that 300 million. But this is not the way it's done.
You have to see you down there with a pistol, shoot your way in.
Now, as we said, you cannot get that money until you apply for the money, and the window of application comes from July 1 to August 15th. So I worked with Pioneer Reese a few years ago, and we were doing the GNETS building. You are well aware of that. The GNETS building, we started planning that building in January, and we needed to have it ready by August. And so we went through a planning process, and they have no access to capital outlay money. And we got it done. But in a school system, it don't work that way. If you're gonna make an application in July 1, in this window that comes up this late summer, you should have had the plans in place 2 years ago, or at least a year ago. You need to have that in your facility plan. You need to have your funding in place. You need to have all your architectural drawings. You need to have all your, everything that goes with that plane project. It needs to be sitting on go right now, so that in July 1 comes around, you're ready to make that application. And you're not gonna be able to do that project until the next year at the earliest. Because you make that application, the process is you make the application in say July 1, which is probably about the earliest date you can make it. The application is completed, it is sent to the DOE with your superintendent's signature on it. The DOE approves it in about 2 weeks. Takes them 2 weeks to evaluate the application. Comes back, and he probably